Okay, guys, so we're going to start chapter 7, which is talking about the executive branch. A couple of key vocabulary words. First one is term. And we're not talking about vocabulary terms. A term is how long someone gets the job. The next key word is budget, which is a plan for spending money. Some people, when they hear the word budget, they think it just means cheap. That's not what it means. It means taking your money and planning what you're going to use each dollar for. Diplomat and ambassador mean similar things. They are people from our government that work with other countries' governments. Foreign policy means dealing with other countries. Cabinet, not the kind behind me, but the cabinet, when you're talking about the president, is the people who he chooses to help him run the country. Okay, for the president of the United States, he's heard on the radio or on the news pretty much every single day. If you think back the past couple years, we see the president a lot on the news constantly, especially with all the stuff going on right now. You can read about him on the front page of the newspaper. If you go on Google, there's going to be an article about something the president's doing within the first couple news links. And he's known to millions of people around the world. If you think about it, in America, we don't know who the leader of other countries are. Most people can't name one other president or prime minister. But most other countries know who the leader of America is because we are a pretty powerful country. So the president might be in Texas, trying to figure out why all their electricity's off, trying to figure out if they've taken the steps to stop that from happening again. They can meet with foreign leaders from around the world to try to keep the peace and stop, things from turning into war. And they can also do smaller things, like they can be at a baseball game and they can throw out the first pitch. So they have serious responsibilities and more ceremonial responsibilities too. So the president might be the single most powerful person in the world, and some people say he might have the hardest job in the world too. So if you think about it, even a very popular president is going to have a large portion of the country not like him. Like right now, they said Joe Biden's approval rating is pretty high. They said between 60 and 70%, but what that means is 30 to 40% of the country doesn't like him still. So even if he's doing everything he can to do a good job, a portion of the country is not going to approve. When things go good, the president gets credit for it, and he's usually a popular leader. So when Trump was the president recently and the economy was doing well, he got credit for it and people liked him. When things go bad, the president catches the blame. So even if it's not the president's fault, they're usually the one who catch the blame for it because it's their responsibility to try to fix it and make sure the country is going in the right direction. So to be the president, there's not a whole lot of requirements. There's just a couple of minor rules that you have to meet, and then you got to win the election. So the three main requirements: you have to be born a United States citizen. You have to be over 35 years old, and you have to have lived in America for at least 14 years. So that's not a whole lot of specific requirements. That means in a couple of years, I could run for president if I wanted to. Doesn't mean I'm going to win, but it means I could run for the job. The Constitution also says that the president's term will be 4 years. So if you are elected president, you get that job for 4 years unless some things happen, unless you die in office or you're impeached and removed. The 22nd Amendment limited how many times you can be president. When the 22nd Amendment was passed, it made it so no president can serve more than 2 terms. It doesn't matter if they're back to back. So let's say Donald Trump runs for president again in a couple of years. He could win the election, and that would be his second term. He could not be president again after that. So Congress decides the pay for the president, and this book's a little bit outdated. The president's salary is actually closer to $500,000, about $500,000. And that's a lot of money, but it's not nearly as much as someone like LeBron James or Tom Brady makes. They make way more money than that. But being the president does come with some perks. They have transportation wherever they go. They have Air Force One. They have the Secret Service. They get to live in the White House, which is 130 rooms. They have a private chef. They have private doctors. They have people to take care of pretty much everything there for them. The president also has a place called Camp David, which is basically like a secret hideout retreat for the president to go and escape, the attention for a little while. So the president doesn't just have one job and one responsibility. He's got many different responsibilities. As chief executive, it's his responsibility to carry out the laws. He's got to pick people who help him run the country, which would be his cabinet. So he's going to try to choose people who he trusts and can do a good job. If you've been watching the news, Joe Biden right now is struggling to get some of his cabinet positions approved by the Senate. He sends ideas for laws to Congress, and he's got some input when they're making laws. He can tell them what kind of changes he thinks should be made, and he's got the final say when it comes to signing or vetoing. He also has to come up with a budget, which is a plan for the country's money. We don't have unlimited money. And what that means is the president has to decide what to spend money on. He's got to decide what's more important. It could be, education in schools, or it could be military, it could be medical research. There's not enough money for everything. He has to decide how much to give to each thing. Every year, he's got a plan for more than $1 trillion worth of budget. He's also the chief of state, and I'll explain what that means in just a second. So as chief of state, he's basically the face of the United States. He meets with leaders from other countries, and he has a ceremonial role. Like, he's going to be there shaking hands, welcoming people, gives speeches when good things happen, and gives speeches when bad things happen. So he represents the United States to other countries in the world. So he's basically our main representative. He's the face of the country. He's also the chief diplomat. And diplomat means working with foreign policy. So what that means is he is responsible for making agreements with foreign countries. They could be peace treaties, they could be trade agreements. He's the one who's going to be making deals with foreign countries to either, keep the peace or maybe escalate a conflict. He is also the commander-in-chief. And what that means is he is the leader of the armed forces. Now, when they say that doesn't mean he can make the military do whatever they want or whatever he wants. He is going to be, if you think about it like a football team, he'd be more like the team owner, not the coach. The coach is going to be the one calling the plays, which would be like the generals. And the president can give, guidelines and suggestions, and he can say what he wants done, but most of the military decisions are going to come to the military officials, the Secretary of Defense, and the generals. And we learned in the last chapter, the president cannot just declare war. That's up to Congress. So he's the leader of the military, but he can't do specific, missions and send them on, he can't do things that are going to lead to a war without Congress getting involved and either approving or denying. He's also the chief lawmaker. We talked about this a little bit in the last chapter. He's got some pretty big influence on a law. When a bill gets to his desk, he's got a couple of decisions he can make, and the two main ones are he can sign it, which makes it official, or he can veto it. He's also the party chief. And the party chief means he is the face of his political party, the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. And what that really comes down to is if the president is doing a good job and he's very popular, more people from his team or his party are likely to get reelected in the next election. But if the president's not doing a good job and he's messing a bunch of stuff up, his team is likely to suffer. So his main responsibilities as party chief is to get more people from his party reelected. And when they do that, that makes getting things done a little bit easier. We talked about in the Senate right now, it's split 50-50, 50 Democrats, 50 Republicans. So it is really hard for them to pass things through because you either have to have everybody on your team agreeing or get a couple people from the other team to agree. So the president has lots of responsibilities. He's got to do all of these jobs well, and he's supposed to put the interest of the country first. He's got to listen to the people who elected him. If he makes promises to the people who voted for him and he doesn't keep those promises, it's unlikely that they'll get reelected. Okay, guys, so you need to go into Google Classroom and you are going to work on Chapter 7, Lesson 1 worksheet.